effective leaders listen, effective leaders engage with direct reports, with the team, with external stakeholders. So what I've learned when I go through these transitions, or if I'm driving a company or a business through a transformation, it takes a lot of listening. People think the first thing you have to do is, here's my vision, here's the mission, here's what we're going to do. That's great. That comes later. The first thing you have to do is understand the environment you're in and see your challenges from the outside in, not the inside out. And so getting together with direct reports, roundtables with employees that you may not come across in everyday life to try to get a view. And it's always interesting to see their perspective versus your perspective.
My guest today is Matt Espe, who has led multi-billion-dollar companies across manufacturing, infrastructure, and business services, including Armstrong World Industries. He's now a chairman, advisor, and board member for multiple organizations. Today, we're talking about leadership mindset, the make or break in any big transformation. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So you have led companies with tens of thousands of employees through massive transformations. What advice do you have for leaders on how to support their team's well-being through those big changes?
Well, I think the well-being and mental health are foundational. Transformations, recoveries, massive changes in companies requires a tremendous amount of energy. It requires physical and mental commitments. And I think sometimes leaders kind of lose their way in terms of how they lead the people through the transition. And so I think it's important to set a reasonable pace as you work through a significant transformation and be mindful of where everybody is mentally. It's very easy to be mentally fatigued before you become physically fatigued, if that makes sense.
Right. It does make sense. Why do you feel leaders lose their way in that transformation? Is it the pressure? Is it, what are the factors that you think impact the overall well-being of people through massive change?
Yeah. So I think the challenge for leaders when they're doing something like this is the leader is looking forward. So the leader is setting the strategy, they're setting the vision, they're attempting to energize the team, but they're looking forward at the challenge, whether it's internal or external. There's a multitude of stakeholders around them. Might be the board of directors, it might be investors, but they're sort of externally focused as they kind of drive the organization through this. And it's easy occasionally for the leader to forget to kind of look behind them and make sure the team's with them. And the leader will often set, again, this rate and pace of change. And that might work for them sort of physically and emotionally and mentally, but it may be a lot for the people that are following them, especially if you go down the organization and they're kind of farther away from the leadership sort of point of contact. And I've got a great example. Years ago, I was leading a business at GE. It was GE Plastics in Europe. And the company had invested over $1 billion in a manufacturing plant in Spain, and it wasn't working. So that required a change of leadership in the business. I was brought in to help drive the improvements and actually get this plant functional. And so I hit the ground running hard, trying to figure it out, traveling extensively, lots of pressure on me to kind of make this work. And one day, our manufacturing leader, who also happened to be a good friend of mine, kind of came in, shut the door, and said, basically, hey, boss, you're leading, nobody's following. We left the team behind. And I was completely unaware of that. I thought, I'm running, everybody's right behind me. So we literally took a time out and worked on the team, got everybody together, kind of went through what's working and not working. We actually significantly slowed the pace of the changes we were trying to drive. And as a result, probably fixed the issues quicker. And the fixes we put in place were far more sustainable. And so for me, that was a significant lesson in kind of how to lead people through change and keeping everybody intact.
Well, and how great for that team member to communicate that to you.
Yes. I mean, we had the kind of relationship that we had the trust that he was able to do that.
Well, and how important is that? Building that trust with your key people, but also communication. Like, how big of a factor do you think that is in the big picture of things, and especially middle managers and
Yes.
people in management positions with direct reports learning those communication skills? How important do you think that is to the big picture of culture?
It's essential, and it's a challenge because I think in order to be an effective communicator in a complex organization, maybe with a global reach, you need two things. You need simplicity and repetition. You know, the message can't be complicated. It has to be clear, and there have to be just a couple of priorities or a couple of key messages. And then you have to be extremely consistent, almost mind-numbingly so. And what I tell the CEOs that I'm working with today from a board perspective, when they're leading this transformation, when they're going through this change, you have to repeat the same message to a multitude of audiences over and over, almost to the point where you can't handle saying it anymore. Like, I'm tired of my own voice, but that's what it takes to get across an organization.
Yeah, well, and so many organizations are approaching massive changes as we return to office. So many
Yes.
big organizations have announced that they're returning to office. What are your thoughts on that and tips that you might have for other leaders to support their people going through a change like that?
So, return to the office is the third rail of business leadership, right? This is the one that's kind of tough to touch. And listen, not a cop out, but it sort of depends, right? But putting that aside for a second, I believe that organizations that are physically present at least some of the time are just more effective. I think it's hard to build teamwork. It's hard to build strategic and operational alignment remotely. Now, we've all gone through this significant change in our world during COVID. I remember when everybody stopped working, that was so strange. Like, I'm not going to the office. And then 3 years later, that was the norm, right? And so now it's a challenge to get everybody to come back. And the companies I'm involved with today are slowly migrating back to the office, at least initially from a hybrid perspective, like say maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But I believe it's essential in most companies with facing most challenges and opportunities to have this teamwork back in place. It's just there's there's so much value in the informal communications and the dialogue that goes along, that happens when you're together. That just doesn't happen when you're remote. It's just a very different thing.
Yeah, and from the mental health perspective, it's interesting because a huge component of mental well-being is connection with
Yes,
others.
it's so much different on a Zoom call than in person. I mean, can I share another quick story? I mean, this is
Oh,
kind of Zoom call
absolutely.
versus.
Yes.
So this has to do with a fellow board member on a company who I won't name. My first couple of board meetings for this company were Zoom calls, and so you have kind of the Zoom template in front of you, and there's 12 people on the call, right? And so we're going through the meeting, and I'm new to this board at this point in time, and I hadn't met anybody in person yet. And so we're on the call, and I finally do go to my first live meeting for this company. And this woman, that a colleague of mine from the board, on the board, comes up and she goes, "You are so much nicer and funnier in person than you are on a Zoom call." I'm sitting thinking, I'm as nice on Zoom calls as I am in person. And she said, your face on Zoom calls, you always look angry. And I was just concentrating. But I mean, there's an example, and she and I become buddies, right? But
Yeah.
there's an example of sort of your countenance on a Zoom call versus, how you engage in person.
Yeah, I don't disagree. There's something about the exchange of energy in person versus it just does not quite translate through technology. So it'll be interesting. We have had multiple employers ask us, for content or for tips or for support, making that change and how to best, support their teams. So on the topic of change, what were some significant personal challenges that you can remember that you went through big changes in your career, big career transitions, or leading companies through change. How did that translate for you on a well-being level?
Well, change is stressful. I mean, it's stressful. At least in my case, it's stressful. I mean,
Right.
one of the most significant decisions I made in my career was the decision to leave GE after 22 years. And I left GE and I joined a company called Icon Office Solutions, which was about a $5 billion document management company as chairman and CEO. You left this kind of warm, comfortable nest of GE, and now you're the new kid in school, except you're running the school, as the new chairman and CEO. And you're trying to navigate your way around the company, the business, the people. And there was, the culture at Icon was very different from GE. I just remember a couple of days at the end of the day, kind of sitting in my office going, God, what was I thinking leaving GE? What have I done? Right. And that first transformation is the toughest, but there are lessons learned. And really it begins, and I'm not saying that I'm really good at this, but it begins by listening. Effective leaders listen, effective leaders engage with direct reports, with the team, with external stakeholders. So, what I've learned when I go through these transitions, or if I'm driving a company or a business through a transformation, it takes a lot of listening. I mean, people think the first thing you have to do is, here's my vision, here's the mission, here's what we're going to do. That's great. That comes later. The first thing you have to do is understand the environment you're in and see your challenges from the outside in, not the inside out. And so getting together with direct reports, roundtables with employees that you may not come across in everyday life, to try to get a view. And it's always interesting to see their perspective versus your perspective. And at the end of the day, it's their perspective that counts. You have to understand where they are and to some degree kind of meet them where they are. And then you shape your strategy, the vision, the mission sort of around what you find. And I think if you do that thoughtfully, you're a hell of a lot more effective.
Have you come into companies where you can immediately feel that the culture might not have bred that openness and that level of communication that you need to be successful as a leader of an organization? And then what do you do about that to
Um,
create that safety?
yeah, the answer is yes every time. But
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's not
you know,
easy to do, create a culture of safety.
well, in my experience, I say this only because it's true. Each of my predecessors in every job I've had have been fired. And
Wow.
so when I show up, it's not a good thing. And so people aren't necessarily waiting for me to arrive. It's kind of human nature under these situations for people to kind of sort of insulate themselves, sort of go inside a little bit. And there's risk in their minds of sharing too much, right? And so it's really important. And again, I'm not saying that I'm really good at this, but I try. It's really important right off the bat to establish some consistent ground rules in terms of, and again, building trust. We talked about my friend in Europe a few minutes ago, and understand. Again, it gets back to intellectual curiosity. Help me understand what's going on here. Be open, even if it's done anonymously. If you kind of have an onboarding technique, but the first thing is really to ask a ton of questions to try to build some perspective and context around what's going on. Icon Office Solutions was a $5 billion company with with very geographically disseminated. Only 10% of the employees at Icon worked at headquarters. It was so that's an incredible cultural challenge. And you think about transforming, and the company was basically a function of a bunch of small dealerships that had been rolled up. So not only was it decentralized geographically, each one of these little pockets had their own culture. And it took several years and frankly, to be honest with you, some leadership changes to kind of integrate into sort of a common set of values, behaviors, and attitudes, which then really is your culture, right? I mean, culture is simply a set of shared values. right? And you can express those values in how you behave. So that was, that's pretty foundational work if you're going to get an organization aligned.
Yeah, that's good feedback in terms of what is needed to to get your leadership team aligned.
Exactly.
It's those shared values. Now, when you would go in, would there be a time investment in that with those leaders that might have been in those different locations? Like, how did you organize that and pull that together in terms of making sure everybody was on the same page, the communication to that layer?
It sort of happens in a couple of different phases. Informally, you travel. Informally, you're highly visible to the organization, and you have a message you're sharing, but you're, in my case, conducting roundtables. So I'm in with employees and I'm asking questions. And you're going to get the folks that are going to sit back, don't want anything to do with it. I'm going to endure this session and get the hell out of here. So there's no damage. And then you get the folks that are more than happy to share everything that they can. What I learned, kind of a small little technique, is you make those roundtables very small and intimate. Then there's no place to hide. If there's 7 or 8 people and me, it's hard not to say something. So informally, you have to engage in person, physically, and that takes a tremendous amount of time. More formally, from a process perspective, I use an organizational development process that really helps us first identify the values and behaviors that are important to us as we think about culture, and then assess leaders as it relates to those values and attitudes. And then, depending upon how they fall out, you either coach them up, reward them for already being there, or in some cases, unfortunately, they have to exit and go someplace else. But you have to do this, that's kind of the what, but you have to do that very thoughtfully. It takes a tremendous amount of patience. And your job as a leader is to coach and teach. What I tell the CEOs I'm working with, performance management and organization development is your single biggest teaching opportunity. And that's, I think, gets back to mental health and resilience. It's
Mhm.
that it's that approach to organization development. It's that approach to building culture, I think, that really makes it sustainable. And it's patient. And again, my friends and family will tell you I don't drip patience, but in this situation, it's essential.
So, what one mindset shift that you teach or remember teaching that had an impact on a situation like that?
My evolution as a leader, and as a result, the advice and counsel I give to the CEOs I'm working with is being patient is okay. So if you knew me 20 years ago, I wasn't known for my gentle patience, but I've seen enough damage and carnage by not being patient, and a lack of effectiveness and ability to transform companies, that, you know, patience and understanding, slowing down a little bit, can really accelerate the transformation that you're trying to achieve. It's not just brute force, rate, and pace that gets you there. It's thoughtful, mindful application of patience, of teaching, of listening, and that actually accelerates the transformation. It's somewhat counterintuitive, but it gets back to making sure the team's right there with you. Now, I'm a lot better at it today at 66 years old, in a boardroom, than I was 20 years ago as a CEO. But when I do talk to the folks I'm working with, it really is, it's okay to be patient. Slow down.
It's a great tip. Was that a painful lesson for you to learn
Horribly
as a leader?
painful.
Yeah.
Horribly painful.
Yeah.
And as leaders, we get there's several sources of feedback. You have formal 360s. You have people quitting because you know because they don't like what you're doing. And then, as a public or private company CEO, you get feedback from your board. And there were a couple of instances in my run where the board kind of came in and said, listen, we love what you're doing. We love the results. We just don't like, my word's not theirs, the carnage, and so I had, was lucky enough to work for and with boards with directors who had the tons of experience that were sort of giving me that benefit. It's like, just slow down, we'll get there. It just make sure the team's with you. And I think essentially that's the theme. If you're driving this kind of transformation and these sort of changes and hopefully improvements in companies, and you're trying to maintain resilience, you've got to make sure the team's with you the whole way. And it's so easy to lose them.
Mental health challenges make up 10% of workplace healthcare costs and lead to billions in lost productivity each year. Traditional employee assistance programs were created to help address these challenges. However, they are often underutilized because they are focused on reactive solutions instead of proactive solutions. That's why we created Spirence, to prioritize mental wellness in order to prevent mental illness. Spirence's science-backed platform offers an extensive and continually growing library of mental health courses, crafted and delivered by clinical experts. The platform also features live events, interactive coaching, on-demand support tools, and dedicated support for managers. Our approach results in over 800% higher utilization than traditional EAPs. The world is moving towards proactive care, and Spirence is leading the way. Spirence, the future of workplace mental health.
What are some things that you do, that being said, to slow yourself down? How did you learn to slow yourself down and be more mindful through changes and through leadership?
Well, this is almost too easy a question to answer because it's a trite answer, and that is I discovered meditation.
Oh, that's a great
And
answer.
and so 5 or 6 years ago, maybe longer now, I went to a meditation center in Western Massachusetts. And the first time I went by myself. So I would never do this stuff without my wife, but this case, I went alone. I think she was more than supportive to send me up there, honestly, for a week to kind of
At that
check this
point,
out.
yeah,
So,
she's like, yes, he's willing to do something.
and the
Go.
whole I'm sure the whole family was behind this, but I discovered meditation. I was in a group of about 20, 25 people, off by ourselves, total vegetarian diet. I mean, I was all in. I was gonna win meditation that week.
Yeah, like
I'm
a
the only
true
guy.
CEO, all
Right.
in. Yeah.
I can score meditation. I can score yoga. It's a competition. But it was really a place where all electronics were gone, and we meditated several times during the day in yoga and everything that you expect. And I finally started to get it. And it kind of halfway through the session, they were talking about journaling, right? And journal. And so I kind of asked at one breakout session, I said, I want to journal because all the cool kids are doing it, but I just don't know what to do. And so I learned kind of how to journal. And so when I'm on my game, to answer your question, I wake up at 4 a.m. most mornings. I'll get a cup of coffee, and then I'll sit down and meditate for 10 or 15 minutes. Then I'll get ready for my workout at 5. And then sometime during the day, I'll try to journal. And it could be, something I hate journaling, or it could be whatever I'm going through. I have a couple of good friends that are also into this, so we kind of support each other. But that's probably for me the biggest change.
Well, and then you're an athlete as well, right? I mean, we were
Yeah, I do. I'm very active. I'm into a bunch of different things. My joke is I lead an active senior lifestyle. You know,
Oh, goodness. Are you in your 60s?
Mid 60s. I'll be
Okay, okay.
67 in 2 days.
Oh, God, happy
Yeah.
birthday.
Thank you very much. Yeah. But yeah, so I cycle, surf, ski, play racket sports, golf, everybody's required. As a 66-year-old, it's also pickleball's required. All of us guys play pickleball. And the other thing I do that's a little unique is I pole vault. I'm a master's pole vaulter.
Yeah, so tell me more about the pole vaulting. How did that come into the picture? How and when and why?
That's all good questions. So I started pole vaulting in high school. So I played football and I ran track. And you have to understand that the pole vaulters are the guys, people on the track team that can't do anything else. So we don't show up wanting to pole vault. We show up pole vaulting because we're too slow running. We're not strong enough to do, So it's all the misfits. But I got to be fairly good at it. Was recruited to on a track scholarship at the University of Idaho. I was a pole vaulter in college, and so went through that. Stopped. Years later, I met a trainer here in near Philadelphia. Was working with him. Found out he was the Villanova pole vault coach. And so for years and years, he kept trying to get me to come back into it. And I was working, I didn't have the time. Long story short, he convinced me 2 to 3 years ago to start training again. And so that's what we're doing. So
Oh my God.
yeah, yeah.
What
So
was that like getting back into it?
well, I would love to tell you it was like riding a bike, but it was really painful.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
like,
I
it's
would think.
the 60-plus-year-old body is not the 18 to 20-year-old body. The good news is like every other sport, technology's evolved, things have become more, they become easier and more forgiving. But it takes a toll. And so a lot of injuries, uh, but it's just great. So we're getting close to competing again, hopefully soon. But we're training. It's just something that I enjoy doing. The thing about pole vaulting, and I know this isn't about, we're not here to talk about pole vaulting per se, but it's sort of like golf in that you're not really competing against the other person you're pole vaulting against. You're just trying to do better than you've done the last time. And so it's almost a competition with yourself. And I kind of like that.
Yeah, no, see, I think that's really interesting. That's why I did want to talk about it because I think that in terms of mental health, that having other focuses like that and other outlets like that are really important in the big picture of how you show up at work and how you show up for a team.
I think that's true. And I always try when I'm at my most effective, I've learned that I've been able to balance kind of three things. One is the physical, being, working out, eating well, nutrition. My next call is with my nutritionist, who's going to be very angry with me for the choices I made this week at the board meeting. But, but, but the physical dimension is important. The intellectual, leg on the stool is important. Reading, engaging, learning. It's sort of exercising the mind. And then I don't know if you want to call it spiritual or reflective, but that mindfulness, meditation, reflection. And so, again, I don't want to claim that I'm always in balance among those three, but I always think about those three and try to maintain some balance in that with that combination.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and it is always going to be a moving target for
Yeah,
everybody because our life is moving and
there's a lot of stuff coming at us.
Exactly. Of all of those things, we talk about a lot about this on the show. Of all of the things that you do for stress relief, is there one that stands out that if you do not do this on a daily or a weekly basis, you are not showing up as nice Matt. You are
Yeah,
showing up as it's like-
the the other man. It's the workout.
yeah.
It's the workout. I mean, listen, meditation's essential, but if I don't get the workout in, and if I don't move some way, most days, there are days that I have to recover, right? But if I don't get some activity in most days, I feel completely off balance. And I don't care if I'm in Philadelphia, London, or Shanghai. I've got to build that into my routine. I rediscovered swimming. So you crawl off a plane in Tokyo or Shanghai at Singapore. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You've been on a 15, 16-hour flight. You don't want to go to the gym and start slamming around weights because your body and your mind are all screwed up. But each of these hotels have a great pool that nobody uses. So I'll just swim laps for half an hour.
Yeah, you make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then kind of back to the pole vaulting,
Yeah.
but there's a question behind it. Are your kids and is your family proud of not only the pole vaulting, but the career, and the organizations that you've led? Like, how has that been throughout your career? The interaction with your family and your kids and the balance between that. Has that been a challenge, or is that something that you have tips on for others?
Well, every family's different. In our case, we moved 15 times.
Yeah.
So most of that with GE. We've lived all over the world. We've lived in Holland, Singapore, Belgium. We moved all around the U.S. We've settled here like 20 years ago, just in time to get our oldest daughter into her freshman year of high school, and we stayed here. So I've been married 45 years. My wife's probably going to correct the numbers specifically, but I'm rounding.
And
Um,
15 days.
there you go, in 6 hours.
Yeah.
We have 4 kids: girl, boy, or now woman, man, woman, man. Um, Both daughters are married. We have 2 grandkids from our oldest daughter, Erin, and one on the way with our youngest daughter, Caroline. Listen, they've been extremely supportive because they still talk to me with
Yeah.
everything we put them through. They are really bright, and they keep me grounded. So
Yeah.
if I get a little full of myself, which they will tell you happens occasionally, you know, they are right there to kind of knock me down and, bring me back, I should say. They are extremely sarcastic. They've got massive intellects and rapier wits, and you just don't want to get caught in the crossfire.
Any of them become leaders?
It's funny. They're very different. So it's interesting having 4 kids, same parents, same environment, 4 very different paths. Our oldest daughter is a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And so she's her husband, our son-in-law, is going to law school. So that'll be a very different path. Our oldest son lives in London, works for Comcast, markets film and TV content to Western Europe. He got his degree at NYU in film, and so he's living a very different life.
Yeah.
And he recently got dual citizenship, so I think he's there, for the duration. Our youngest daughter, Caroline, is our entrepreneur. She started 2 business. Well, she started a gifting business that has online gift boxes and has a gift boutique in Wayne, PA here, Daring and Company. So I got a little plug in there
I
for
was
her.
gonna say, you better say the name. Do
and
it.
and she also owns a fitness studio, a Bar 3 studio that she
Wow.
works with my wife. So she's active. And number 4, our son Patrick, who's engaged to a lovely young lady that we love, just changed jobs. He now works for PayPal in New York City in kind of a cool startup that they have. So, they're all on different paths, but they're all, very successful, very happy, and very grounded. And the good news is all 4 of them get along great.
Well, that is great news. And do you find a correlation between raising kids and raising organizations? Have there been a lot of correlations there?
Well, if they were here, they would tell you that they've received several operating reviews over the years, and they've had a lot of performance feedback. It's funny to this day. They remind me that all the tough conversations we've ever had have been had in the living room.
Okay.
So, in
You have a
junior high
spot?
school,
That's
yes,
your round table.
exactly. So
Yeah.
they would come into the living room, and my oldest daughter, Erin, our oldest daughter, Erin, says it's hard for her to go in the living room on Christmas Day because that's where the Christmas tree is. She goes, my palms still get sweaty coming into this room, and
Oh.
she's, in her mid to late 30s. So, but I think, listen, what I've learned from my kids, and again, I hope I get this right over half the time. You have to kind of meet them where they are. I mean, and the joke I have with them is, there's 2 ways we can do this. I can meet you where you are, and you're 4 very different individuals, which means how we engage might seem unequal. I might give on something for one of you that I may not give on another, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So from your perspective, it won't be the same because you're not at the same place. The other option, by the way, is I can meet you where I am. And that won't be nearly as pleasant.
It will not be good.
And so, kind of reluctantly, they accept the former. And so, but the translation to organizations is in order to be effective, you have to acknowledge where everybody is. You can't just, in most cases, when you join an organization as a leader, you have to remember that train's moving. They weren't sitting still waiting for you to show up.
Yep.
Whatever is happening. And you had better take some time to understand that before you start thinking about, what you bring to the table and next steps.
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, there's the facts, you have to operate with the facts and,
Exactly.
Accountability to those. And then there's the other portion, which, which we've talked a lot about, and that's the culture and the seeing the employees as humans.
Exactly.
So Matt, why do you think that organizations should be prioritizing mental health today?
Listen, I think it's a stressful world. And I mean, you can name any element of our existence today, and just current events alone, it's just incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
And we're getting news 24 hours a day or information or opinions 24 hours a day. It's affecting our behavior amongst each other and with each other. I think it's incumbent upon leaders to be very sensitive to what the employees or their leaders are going through when they leave the office.
Right.
And what I've learned is, everybody's got a story. The happiest person you see at work has a set of issues or challenges they're working with, right? And most of us, at least my generation, most of us don't bring that to work. We kind of park it outside.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it goes away. It's waiting for you at the end of the day, or it's waiting for you over the weekend. And I think the thing that's changed that's changed in the environment in the last several years is that amount of stress and pressure that exists outside the work. And that affects how they behave and act inside the work. And so leaders today, leaders that have emerged in the last 5 or 6 years, I think have a far more complex set of challenges to consider as it relates to mental health than I did when I was coming up. When you had a couple of channels on the TV, a couple of newspapers, we all had challenges with children, kids, experiences, whatever. I just think the velocity of things that the workforce needs to deal with today is just unbelievable. And I think that really challenges leadership to be far more thoughtful about an employee's 24-hour existence, not just their 8 to 10-hour existence at work. Because that line blurs now, right? I mean, we've seen that. It's work goes home and home comes to work.
Absolutely.
Right? And I just think you have to be very thoughtful about that.
Very well said.
Yeah, thank you.
Very, very well said. Okay, so Matt, I want to end the show today with some rapid fire questions. Are you open for that? Are you up for that?
Fire away.
All right, let's do it. Morning reset, meditation, workout, or straight to email?
First thing, email.
Oh, we're honest. I love it.
Yep. I got to be honest. It's first thing, email.
I love it. But then you meditate.
Then right to meditation.
Because you did tell us that. Okay.
Yes.
Most stressful board meeting. Describe it in one word.
Boring.
Okay. I could see that being tough for you. One small habit that helps you protect your mental health at work.
Coffee.
Love it. If you had to recommend one book that shaped how you think about leadership and people, what would it be?
God, there's so many. I'm looking at my library.
You're like, give me something.
I tell you what, it's a book that's probably 40 years old, In Search of Excellence.
Okay, I'm actually not familiar with that one.
See, that's the age difference.
Look at that.
Yeah, In Search of Excellence. I think I'm going to guess it was published in the early to mid 80s.
Wonderful. I'll have to check
Peters
that
and
one out.
Waterman.
Okay, have to check that one out. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I think with that, we will finish up. Thank you so much for being a guest today, Matt.
My pleasure.
And for our audience, if you enjoyed this content and other content on leadership, resilience, burnout, and all things workplace mental health, don't forget to follow Prevention Pioneers on all major platforms. Like, follow, share with your colleagues and friends. And thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Prevention Pioneers.